Posted by you/so many tomatoes. BFF visited and gave me the silent treatment, was mean. This is a long one, but I literally can't sleep, and it's been eating away at me for days. I recently moved from the PNW to Las Vegas. One of my closest friends booked flights to visit for 7 days, knowing full well I was going to have to work the first 4 days he would be here. He told me he wasn't up for planning anything and asked me and my husband to plan the things we'd do during his stay. He didn't offer any suggestions or insight, just thanked us for taking the lead. I was excited because I'm finally in a position to do some nice things for my friend of almost 7 years. We spent days planning, turned in our casino points to get him free hotel stays, discounted show tickets, and I picked out my favorite vegan restaurants, cafes, and places and made him a hand-drawn schedule, so he'd have an easy trip. I made sure to plan for him to have plenty of alone time, and time where he'd have access to our car so he wouldn't end up burned out or bored. I left the last 2 days of the schedule pretty open since I wouldn't be working, and so we'd have some time to hang out without my husband. He's my best friend after all. I'd wanted to spend some time together before he left. Things were going very well. We ate food and saw shows and had fun before and after work every day. I was barely sleeping to accommodate him, and my husband and I barely had a moment alone together. But on my mind, it was worth it because my friend was visiting. On the 5th day, my first non-work day, we had lots of plans and he seemed okay, but we took him on the high roller, Ferris wheel, and he sat on the backside the whole time. I tried to get him to see the sunset and the strip by looking out westward and he looked for a second and then went back to his seat. He seemed very unimpressed and off after that, but nothing too intense. We took him to an art installation that was immersive later that night, so cool, nothing like my husband and I had ever seen, and friend seemed anxious, sticking to the back and even not staying with us or the group as we were guided through the exhibit. We grabbed a bite to eat at a bar down the street, and he seemed uncomfortable and didn't say much. He also made a comment implying that my husband was homophobic, completely out of left field. My husband is not and would never be, and it didn't even fit the moment, before we dropped him off in the evening at his hotel. On the 6th day, I picked him up at his hotel on the strip. I was trying to coordinate our plans and drive on a very stressful road, and he was trying to say something to me as we were leaving the parking lot and I missed what he said. After we got onto a side street, I asked him what he said and he kind of brushed me off. I didn't think anything of it. I was just excited to have my first day alone with him and to take him to this secret cafe that had gone viral on TikTok. We get to the cafe, and that's when I notice things are off. He tells me he just needs to eat. So, we order, and he picks a very uncomfortable spot right next to the front door and refuses to explore the cafe with me. I invite him to go sit in this really cool spot in the back and he says in the most flat and unexpected way, "No, but you can." He basically tells me to go. So, I finish my toast and take my drink back there, and I see he's like furiously journaling as I go sit in the spot I took him there to see by myself. He proceeds to give me the silent treatment / one-word answers for the remainder of the day. He's fully not answering me when I'm telling him things or asking him questions. I was awkwardly grinning and trying to figure out what was happening without being confrontational. I really didn't know what was going on. I was trying to talk to him in the evening, and he was on his phone texting someone the entire time and flat out ignoring me. We went to some shops together that he had mentioned wanting to go to and he ignored me the entire time and scoffed when I showed him what I was buying. While we were on the strip, I stopped to watch one of the hourly light shows and he got pissed, walking around me and sighing. The show lasts 3 minutes, until he finally stormed off. Someone noticed him and came up and asked me if I was okay, and I just said I was. I saw his Snap story the next morning basically saying the light show was stupid. My husband noticed that he was acting strangely and asked me about it that evening. He also noticed that friend had been using his weed pen a lot more when he'd seen him that day. We stopped by the apartment one time and my husband met us when he got off work, than the days previously. On the final day, he once again refused to speak to me with anything other than one-word answers. I asked him how his morning was when I got him from the hotel, and he said fine and nothing more. When we got to my apartment, I had to run back to the car, and walked in on him speaking normally to my husband. He immediately stopped talking and went to my balcony when I entered, where he proceeded to sit for a very long time, like over an hour, even though it was 113 degrees outside. My husband was asking what was wrong with him and I told him I honestly didn't know. Apparently, he'd had a very eventful morning though and had been telling my husband all about it until I got back inside. I went to the patio and asked him about it, and he once again gave me one-word answers and was speaking to me in a tone I've never heard before. He was looking at me with such a look as disgust I had to leave before I said something. I guess husband noticed he was smoking weed pretty much the whole time he was out there, but I wasn't in view of the balcony, so I wasn't aware of that. He finally came inside and sat on the couch with his headphones on watching TikTok for hours. I tried to talk to him several times. This was the part of the trip literally set aside for us to just hang out and talk, and he refused to even pause the video and completely ignored me save for one time, where he snapped at me his answer and then went back to his video. I put on a show he likes, and we watched it together. However, he still was disengaged and didn't answer any of my questions about the show. My husband wanted some food, so I asked him if he wanted anything. His answer was almost shouted, "I don't care, I'm not the one who wants food." We had bought tickets for this very cool art installation for his final evening, super expensive, and he refused to engage with any of it. He wouldn't explore this huge area with us, he didn't say a word, he sat by the entrance on his phone the entire time. When my husband and I had explored the whole place, we asked him if he'd seen everything and he rolled his eyes and spat, "I mean, is there anything to see?" He gave me a spiteful look and went back on TikTok. I tried to tell him we would just leave, and he nodded but didn't look up. We left and realized he didn't follow us. I went back for him, and he got up slowly and went to follow me out. I thought I'd try to get through to him and tried to lead him through this cool part of the installation, but he literally veered away and went straight out the exit. I didn't even see him go through and he was nowhere to be found afterwards. My husband and I were so surprised at all this because this kind of exhibit is usually right up my friend's alley and he seemed to be having such a bad time. He refused to meet up with us or leave the building and didn't meet up with us until the very last second. I don't know where he was for a good 45 minutes. I was only able to find him because I let him know the restaurant we'd picked was going to close soon and we needed to go. He came straight to the car and didn't say a word to anyone. We sit down at the restaurant and my husband goes to the restroom, and I take the opportunity to ask him what's going on. He makes this dramatic surprised face and dramatic double take thing and goes, "Do you really want to unpack all of that right here?" He seems so offended that I would ask and says, "What would make you think this is an appropriate time to ask that?" I was shaking, I was so nervous at his unexpected response, and I just said, "Well, it's quiet, husband's in the bathroom, and you leave super early in the morning." He rolls his eyes and laughs at me, like audibly. It was so weird. I don't think I've ever seen him roll his eyes at me. He's one of my best friends. He's never talked to me or looked at me this way in my life. He tells me he is only going to engage because he knows that is what I want and starts to tell me that the morning before, he was trying to finally open up and let me in, when I picked him up, but I was in driving mode and didn't hear him, and that was when he admits, his energy shifted. I tell him I don't understand. That driving on the strip isn't an easy thing to do and that I only missed one thing, and was only distracted for a few minutes, and as soon as I was able to focus again, I had asked him to repeat himself. He then proceeded to say that wasn't the only thing, that he felt like he wasn't considered when we planned the trip out. He said we planned the trip on the idea of him and not his actual self. I was floored. I told him, tears in my eyes, that I did the best I could considering how much I was working. I told him I thought he would like the things I planned, I genuinely did. He's an artist and we've gone to a lot of art installations together in the past, so I really thought he would like the ones I took him to, and I asked him how he was so upset that he would give me the silent treatment for days. I told him my feelings were hurt and that we lost our only time together, and he just stared blankly at me and didn't say anything. I had never experienced my friend so cold. The tears spilled over, and I left the restaurant and broke down in the parking lot. He texted me a few times saying that he hadn't done anything wrong, that both our experiences could be valid, and that he didn't deserve to be confronted in a sushi restaurant just for treating me like I was invisible for 2 days. It made no sense. I didn't want to fight him, so I told him I was just emotional that he was leaving and exhausted from barely sleeping for almost 7 days. We went back to the apartment in silence, and I went straight to bed. I figured we'd talk in the morning, or maybe even we'd get up and sort it after I got some rest. However, shortly after I went into my room, my husband and I heard the door slam. He packed his stuff and left without a word. I told him in the morning that I needed some space and that it wasn't okay to be openly mean to me no matter how much he felt he'd been slighted, that if he wanted to be my friend, he needed to communicate with me when he was upset. I told him again that I did my best and that I didn't appreciate him continuously yucking my yum, which he did pretty consistently through his trip. He didn't like Vegas and he didn't like my future plans and he didn't like the things I wanted to show him. He didn't like the second, free, hotel room we'd gotten him, on the strip at a fancy hotel/casino. And he replied saying he wished me well, bye. It's been days and I can't figure out where I went wrong, so I can't figure out how to fix it. It's like I lost one of my closest friends because I tried as best as I could, but he still wasn't happy. There's only been one time in the past where I've seen him behave similarly and it wasn't directed towards me at the time, but he didn't speak to me for 3 months after I witnessed that side of him. He seems to think that I was in the wrong for not planning the trip to his specific tastes, and I assume because I didn't make enough space for him the first 4 days, but he knew that I had to work those days before he even booked the trip. He also thinks I was way out of line for asking him about it at the restaurant, even though there was not going to be another opportunity before he left and it was private. We were whispering and away from others, so it wasn't like a big spectacle. I've had nightmares about the looks on his face and the tone in his voice. We talked one of the first evenings he was here, and he told me that he wasn't okay and that his housing situation and employment were unstable and that his life had pretty much gone south since I'd moved. He'd told me that he'd caught himself smoking way too much weed and that it was starting to become a problem at work. I'm scared to death that he's being crushed inside himself and that he is suffering. It's the only explanation that I can come up with for his behavior. So, I want to reach out, I want to fix this so I can help him if he needs it, but I also don't want to act like the way he treated us is okay. He was extremely disrespectful and, to be honest, pretty ungrateful. He was rude to me and my husband while we broke our backs and wallets to try to make his stay as engaging as possible. So, those of you that made it this far, is the relationship salvageable? If so, how do I maintain my boundaries while also repairing what's been broken? And if it's not something worth saving, how can I move through the loss of my friend of 7 years? TLDR: best friend visited, asked us to plan the whole trip. Ended up becoming cold and rude the last few days, and when I asked him what was up, he said we didn't consider the real him when we planned the trip and that he was finally going to open up to me, but I was in driving mode and didn't hear what he said, so his energy shifted. I did the best I could, spent hundreds of dollars on him, got him free tickets and hotels, planned events I knew he'd enjoyed in the past, and he acted like I was in the wrong for them not really being his kind of things. He left in the middle of the night without saying anything, and I don't think we're friends anymore. He was really high while this behavior was happening, and I know his life back home isn't going well, so I'm wondering if and how I can forgive him while not moving my boundaries. Now on to the only comment. Posted by Solar Perfume. His life is going into the dumper, and he doesn't know how to deal with it. He sounds depressed and is self-medicating with weed. No hate on it, but weed shouldn't make you lose your job. That said, I have great friends, and I don't think they do all the planning you did. He is feeling down, but he isn't allowed to show up and midway through your exciting trip, start pissing all over everything. The sunset, really? You put loads of thought into this, got him free lodging, let him stay with you, planned things he would like, gave him access to a vehicle, ensured he had alone time, and he acted like an ingrate. And worse, he wouldn't even tell you he was feeling off until you had the audacity to ask in a restaurant. The horror. I can't believe you had as much patience as you did. Your husband must feel like he just got off another planet. Those great friends of mine? They are great enough that we could tell each other if we were acting like a brat and asking what the hell was up, a lot earlier than those last few days where you chatted on trying to get him to have fun. You could have brought him to a room full of puppies, and he would have turned up his nose. At a room full of puppies. From this story, you sound like a people pleaser, so you may feel uncomfortable not settling this. But he done this before to someone else and stonewalled you for 3 months. Maybe this is who he is. But you need a lot more than this. Both our experiences could be valid. Bullshit. I'm sorry this happened to you.